And there have been quite a few news stories in the US about Chinese cranes and how they have been hacked. A lot of them have cameras on them, like Wi-Fi cameras and things like that are not necessarily set up in the way that they should be. So they can be used to, if you think about a giant crane lifting a bunch of cargo, if it's one of our ports and the crane gets hacked, they could move the crane in a way that it destroys things. They could, mess up the flow of traffic in the port that could set the port back for months. So this company is interesting because it is registered in the Seychelles, and that is also an indicator that it could be trying to bury its ownership in places that would, get less oversight and people would dig into less. They have more legal loopholes and things like that.
Hey everyone, David Bombal back with the amazing Ray Baker. Ray, great to have you back on the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So for those of you who don't know Ray, you should if you're in the OSINT world. She's the author of this book, Deep Dive. Fantastic OSINT book. I was just going over some of the topics again today. Covers a whole bunch of stuff. Ray, you know this better than me, but you're covering ships, you're covering trains, all kinds of things, and you start like helping people if they want to get into OSINT. So give us a quick overview of this book and tell us about the new book that you're writing, because obviously 2026 has got to be AI, right?
It does. It has to. Sorry. So Deep Dive, I wrote as a way to fill in the gap that I was seeing when I started. A lot of the OSINT books that were out there were highly technical, and I felt like, although I was technical, I felt like it kind of cut off a big section of people trying to get into OSINT. So I wanted to just, and I don't want to say dumb it down because there's a lot of content in there that is intermediate and higher level.
Yep.
But I wanted to simplify it into like what matters, why it matters, how you find it, and then some examples. So that's what I did for all the topics. Like you said, I covered transportation, cyber stuff. I even covered NFTs, which, who knows if anybody uses those anymore. Critical infrastructure.
Crypto,
I tried to cover
crypto as well. Sorry, go on.
Yes, crypto, yes. So I tried to cover all the spaces that people might work in and all the angles they might work on, like human trafficking and journalism. And I tried to cover it all while not going too broad and staying relevant to intermediate, higher levels, and beginners. I apologize. I know everybody is probably so over AI right now. But what I wanted to do with that book was speak to the people who may have never used AI before or don't know where to start for intelligence analysis. So it's called Deep Insight AI for the Intelligence Analyst. It goes through workflows, how to create workflows for intelligence analysis, including OSINT, what AI is, what are the different parts of AI, how do the tools work for you and against you. I play both sides, ethics, tons of use cases, and basically how to get started and then where to go from there.
This video is sponsored by Delete Me. I saw a comment on one of my YouTube videos the other day. David, you should stop taking sponsorships from companies that are only based in the USA. Well, the great news is that Delete Me has a growing international footprint. I'm based in the UK and I can use Delete Me. Now, if you're based outside the US, check the international plans page to confirm availability. Now, the great thing about Delete Me is they provide hands-free removal of your data from hundreds of data broker websites, as well as people search websites. They also give you ongoing monitoring and clear privacy reports. Now, this is not going to make you 100% anonymous or invisible online, but it really helps protect you and your family. Get 20% off Delete Me consumer plans when you go to joindeleteme.com/Bombal and use promo code Bombal at checkout, or use the QR code on screen. That once again is joindeleteme.com/Bombal, code Bombal. But give us your gut feeling, right? You do this full time. So just for people who don't know you, you do this full time. You've been doing this for a long time. Does AI actually help you, or is it just like a bunch of noise? Because I hear both sides, right? People love it, people hate it. Are you finding that it's going to help you, or are you finding that it helps you a lot in OSINT and sort of investigating things?
I do, with the caveat that I think newer analysts need to learn how to analyze and collect prior to using AI.
Yeah.
Because if you just start with AI, you don't understand a lot of the steps and processes that you have to know before you integrate AI, and it just becomes noise.
Yeah.
There's just piles and piles of data. And then, cool, you have 5 million email addresses. Where do you start? Where do you go from there? And I think that traps a lot of newer analysts, and they become overwhelmed because it's just so much and they don't know how to, create workflows for themselves, section stuff out. For me, I find AI very useful. I use it every day in some respect, between writing, stuff for school, because I was still going to school, stuff for work. I'm helping with reporting, and I use it a lot for lead generation and knowing it's not always completely accurate. But for instance, if I wanted to find a whole bunch of vessels that are associated with a company, just ask it, it'll give me a bunch, and then I'll verify whether they're real. But it gives me a starting place. And sometimes that's the hardest place.
Some people might misunderstand what you just said. You've been in the game a long time and you are very well qualified. What are you studying at the moment?
I'm studying intelligence analysis, doing a master's at Johns Hopkins. And I am submitting my proposal at King's College for a PhD. So assuming that they let me in, that's the next step.
So Ray, I want to get into talking about the topic of the video, but just before we do that, just give us like the 30 seconds of, you've obviously well known, I know you, you've written this book, you're writing a new book, but how long have you been doing OSINT for?
I have been in OSINT since about 2019. So I pivoted from a completely unrelated field. I used to work in graphic design. I started going back to school for security and risk analysis. And then I kind of just tumbled into OSINT and intelligence by going to conferences and playing in different capture the flags.
Yeah.
So not very long, but also kind of long in the scope of tech, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, you're way too humble. So you've presented at DEF CON, you've presented around the world. You do this full time. This is your day job, right? Doing OSINT.
Yes, this is my day job. I work in dynamic adversary intelligence. So basically doing OSINT analysis full time from the position of an adversary. What would an adversary attack? How would they go about doing it? What would they look for? And kind of working through that process and then, presenting that in a report or something. My day job varies. I do maritime intelligence. I do cyber threat intelligence. Sometimes I get one-off random find this person kind of tasks. But overall, I do OSINT all day, every day. With a cyber twist.
I love that because that's exactly what the audience, I think everyone who's watching, are most interested in. And the topic, I love this topic. I know it's a passion of yours. It's been in the news recently because of political events. And just for everyone watching, we're not going to take political sides here. We are just explaining what's happening and then looking at it from an OSINT and cybersecurity point of view. Ray's obviously based in the US. I'm based in the UK. So take that as it is. But I mean, Ray, there's been a lot of stuff in the news recently with, the US and Venezuela. The Brits have been involved in like finding ships near the UK. I don't want to spoil it. Tell us what we're talking about. Something to do with dark ships or dark something, right?
Yeah. We're going to talk about dark fleets and shadow fleets. So shadow fleets and dark fleets are fleets of vessels. They're usually older oil tankers that are repurposed for the use of transferring oil. Shadow fleet, they are a fleet of vessels that work in kind of a gray area where they're legal, they're registered with a country, but they may be working under layers of ownership, trying to hide what they're doing. Dark fleet, they just don't care. They're actively manipulating their identity out on the ocean. They're pretending they're somewhere else, all for the purpose of evading sanctions, U.S. sanctions usually, sometimes other countries' sanctions, to transfer oil or cargo to another country, a sanctioned country, for the purpose of funding their day-to-day, funding their military, transferring parts for weapons, or, we saw grain being transferred after the invasion of Ukraine. So these vessels travel back and forth, and they stay under the radar of normal kind of intelligence and analysis.
So Ray, I know you've got some demonstrations, which I love. I love seeing, it's quite scary, really, what you can dig up and, OSINT experts like yourself can do. So take us on the journey. I will start with a very basic question, and then you take us where you want to take us with regards to tools, and we'll look at some freed and some paid, the stuff that people can start with, and then the stuff that you would use as a professional. Boats or ships, I always get it wrong, right? They have this thing, is it AIS or something that they use to track the boats? Is that right?
Yes. So any ship that is over 300 tons, I believe it is required to have tracking on board. So it's their AIS, automatic identification system. It's required. It works over VHF, and it's basically shouting out details every few seconds. And it's saying, I'm here. This is how fast I'm going. This is how much I weigh. This is where I'm headed. And that just pings out constantly. And the purpose was for safety, but analysts can track that data and kind of add, their own analysis to it based on what they're seeing. The tricky part is that the AIS can be manipulated. So that is what dark ships are doing. And that is why it's important to know kind of how AIS works.
So, you take us on the journey. All I know when I was doing some research on this, and you've covered this in our previous video as well. So everyone who's watching, I've linked the previous video as well, where Ray did a fantastic demo and explanation, is that these so-called dark ships or whatever are going to turn their AIS off, so you don't know where they are, kind of thing, right? But obviously the US government and the UK government were able to find some of these oil tankers in the ocean. I don't want to put words in your mouth. Tell us what it's about, and tell us, how do you find these things?
So this kind of activity has been going on for quite a while. I've been in this space for 5-6 years, and I've seen it since I started. I have no idea how long it was going on before then. We're just now starting to target these vessels. I don't know why. Maybe it's for show. Maybe there's something going on in the government they need to do. But they've been boarding these vessels out in the ocean and catching the ones that are going from Venezuela, transferring oil to Russia or China.
Yeah.
And what they've been doing is they've been stopping them and boarding them, basically, and then preventing the transfer of oil. So there are a few things that we need to know about these types of vessels to kind of understand what we need to look for. So the first thing is the AIS manipulation. They can go in and they can change their identity. And a ship's identity kind of works like a car's identity. So with a car, you have a registration number. You have a license plate. You might have a name for your car. I don't know. But a ship will have an IMO number, and that is basically its registration. If it gets sold, that goes with it. That doesn't change. It shouldn't change. So those are things you have to know when you're looking at vessels, so you can see how many times they change their name, or how they're trying to manipulate their identity. So in the AIS system, they can go in and they can change their IMO illegally from one number to the other. And what that does is it will show them as another ship. It could show them as being in another location entirely, because if you're looking at the movements of them, their tracks, they could hop from one place to another. So it makes it difficult to track. Another thing they do is they change their flag. So each ship is required to be flagged by the country that they reside in. And what happens is they will illegally change their flag country to one that might be draw less attention. So if it's a Russian tanker, they might change to Panama, because you're not going to look at Panamanian ships as much as you're going to look at Russian ones. And they will flip back and forth depending on how global stuff is going at that time. So that is also an indicator that something might be illicit. They will rename their vessels. They will change the flags. They will quite literally paint over the names on the side of the ships. There are some pictures, if you follow Tanker Trackers, which is a great site. I love it. They track a lot of the oil tankers that are going around and what they're doing. And they have shown pictures where the deck is just repainted, because when you're looking at from a satellite image, you can see the deck, and that is one way to track a ship. If all of the fleet has red decks and they paint it green, it makes it harder to associate them together. Or they'll put tarps down. So there's quite a bit of work done. Or they'll change a number, like an old report card. They'll change an F to an A, Yeah, it's funny, but also they go through quite a lot of effort to hide what they're doing.
Ray, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you've teased this website. You've got to show us, what did you call it? Tanker Trackers or something, right?
Tankertrackers.com. And you can visit them on Twitter, X, and they have a dashboard that it's paid, but they give some insights for free. But if you follow them on Twitter or even on LinkedIn, they show updates constantly of, ships that have sank or trackings that they've been doing, because they have people on the ground, like human analysts, who are taking pictures and getting insight that you can't get through most internet sources.
So that example you used where they paint the ship a different color, you could, there's so much here, you could, if you spend a bit of time, perhaps find an example like that or something like that, right? So people who are watching can go on X and have a look at this and they'll find some interesting things.
Yes, absolutely. They have the tarp pictures on here. You can find where they've painted the side of the ship. And somebody from Tanker Trackers has taken the picture of it from the shore. It's very cool.
That's great. Ray, apologies for taking you off on a tangent there. I know you wanted to show us something else, so perhaps you can show us that now.
Yes. So one way that we track ships is through online platforms that collect AIS data, and some of them apply some analysis to it. A lot of these are pay. That's kind of the tricky part, especially in the global climate right now.
Yeah.
They do allow some data for free. So you can go to these sites like MarineTraffic and you can look at what is happening right now. So if there was an ongoing situation, a ship got stuck in the Suez Canal or a warship was captured or something like that, you could go here and see the vessels moving. So the one that I use is MarineTraffic, and you can see this map. This is all the vessels that are presently in the ocean, like at this very moment. And you can see it's quite a few of them. The platform will tell you what type it is. You can see that by the different color, whether it's moving, whether it's, sitting still. And then you can click into them and get more detail, like the tracks, where they were going, where they were coming from. And one ship I wanted to call out was the Pioneer. It used to be called the Pioneer. I don't know why they changed that. But this is one of the vessels that was just, it's been added to the Dark Fleet list. So this is a Russian flagged vessel, oil tanker, and it is part of the Dark Fleet. And this is some details about it. So in MarineTraffic, you are able to see where it is presently, and I will open it on the map in a minute. So this is the Pioneer 1. It is a crude oil tanker flagged in Russia. It is part of the Dark Fleet. And this is the panel that you get in MarineTraffic that shows details about the ship. So you can click on any ship in MarineTraffic and get details. Some of this is behind a paywall, but a lot of it is not. You can get the information about it, like its identity and flag. And that can sometimes be enough for an investigation.
And you can see on the map where it is, right? So it shows you.
Yeah, this is where it is currently. And I will show you that on a bigger version of it in a second. But it also shows the latest AIS, where it's at, how long ago the AIS pinged, details like that will tell you where it is. On the paid version, I have a dashboard, so you can save a fleet. So for instance, if I was tracking the entire Dark Fleet, I could make a fleet and save them all and track them all at one time. So for this, I put a few in a fleet so we could see where they're at. So these 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 vessels. These are part of the Dark Fleet, and you can see on the map where they are right now. And then it gives some more details about, its name, where it is at, destination, and you can add some notes. But if we view this on the live map, so this is the past track for the Pioneer on January 22nd. It's not its whole path, but this is just a few days. You can set it. We can go back to like December. And you can see some things here that would indicate that it's doing possibly illicit activity, aside from it being sanctioned, because I'm pretty sure it's sanctioned by the U.S. So it gives some indicators here. Red, meaning it has stopped or slowed down quite a bit. Orange, it's slowing, and green, it's moving. So we can follow its path and see where it's at. And its movements along with the details that it has here, like draft, which is the weight of the vessel. So it's actually how far the water goes up on the side. So if an oil tanker were to meet with another vessel, transfer a bunch of its oil, the draft would be less. So you can use the numbers to kind of detect whether it's transferred cargo somewhere. This here is, you can see this pattern. It almost looks like it was maybe anchored here. We use patterns like this to understand the pattern of life for vessels and their movements. And there's some in Port Said. You can see its movements. It's probably getting oil, or this is it stopping, and the green is underway. So there's some things that you can see here that might indicate illicit activity, weird stopping points. These dotted lines, this could indicate that it went dark. A lot of times when they're doing something that it shouldn't be doing, maybe it's meeting with another vessel to transfer for cargo, illicit cargo, it will turn off its AIS so people like us can't track it. It will go and do that activity, and then it will come back and turn it back on. So if you were tracking it, you would have no idea where it went in that time frame because the ocean is big, and if it has its AIS off for hours, you don't know where it went. Sometimes they transfer their names. So it's boat A, and then it changes its name to boat B, which is over in another part of the world, and then it changes it back. So trackers like me see it in different parts of the world within seconds. So there's some interesting things that they can do with tracking vessels and trying to hide their identities. One thing I look for when I'm looking into vessels is ownership, because vessels are just, they're boats. They're not doing any activity. It's the people on them. It's the people that fund them. It's the people that run them. So there's some things that we can do when we're looking for ownership. A lot of what they do is transfer stuff to and from ports. So I do a lot of port research. I've done pen tests on ports and port equipment. And one thing we do is assessments of the companies that are at the port who could be facilitating the offloading of cargo or, falsifying of documents, things like that. So one thing we do is go to the port website. So this is the Port Said website, and you can see some details about it, where it's located, some stuff that they would want mariners to know. One thing that I always pay attention to is the features, because a lot of times they list the cranes that they have there. And there have been quite a few news stories in the US about Chinese cranes and how they have been hacked. A lot of them have cameras on them, like Wi-Fi cameras and things like that are not necessarily set up in the way that they should be. So they can be used to, if you think about a giant crane lifting a bunch of cargo, if it's one of our ports and the crane gets hacked, they could move the crane in a way that it destroys things. They could, mess up the flow of traffic in the port that could set the port back for months.
Just a dumb question again.
Yeah.
You said there's dark fleet, and what was the other one, sorry?
Dark fleet and shadow fleet.
So dark is where, say, the US government has said these are vessels that are bad, and they just turn off their tracking entirely, kind of thing. Is that right?
Yes. So the dark fleet explicitly tries to hide its identity, and they are sanctioned. The shadow fleet, they play more in a gray area where they might be used for legal work, but they are also used for illicit work.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily outright bad.
So why don't they just turn off their tracking all the time? Is it they keep it on for safety, I suppose, or just to conform to international laws or something? Why don't they just have it off all the time rather than just certain times?
It is international law to keep it on because it is for safety, so they don't crash into each other.
Yeah.
And I think having it off all the time would draw more attention than turning it off every once in a while, because they can pretend that something went wrong or there was just like a hiccup in the system. There's more plausible deniability, I think. So they try to leave it on. And it's probably a lot to do with safety. They don't want to wreck into other vessels, especially when they're going into things like ports and straits and high traffic areas.
That makes sense. So they will keep it on so you can see what they're doing. And then when they want to do something that they don't want you to see, they either take the identity of another ship, or they just turn it off. And then, like you said, they do their thing, and then they turn it on again when they want everyone to see where they are.
Yes. Yeah. So
Wow.
that's an activity we can track because we can see when it turns off and turns back on. But a lot of these platforms like MarineTraffic and some of the more expensive ones, they use AI to understand maybe where that ship went in that time based on time and ports that are nearby, or like how far the ship could go in that time frame. And then it will present you options of like where it may have gone.
So, I mean, like, I mean, forgetting the politics for a second. So the US boarded a tanker near the UK or something. They obviously have access to all kinds of data. But I mean, if you were trying to see what was going on, they would do something similar to this, I'm assuming. They find out where the ship is, and then they know where it is in the ocean, and then they can just go and take it over, right?
Yeah. They probably use satellite imagery as well to verify where it's at. And then I would assume they have a lot of these same platforms that I'm using here to do research. And I would bet that they've been tracking them for a while.
Yeah.
And they just kind of have been keeping tabs on them and know where they're at. I think it's kind of also a gray area for us that we are boarding them. There are some weird laws about how close vessels can be to the shore.
Yeah.
There's a UNCLOS, which is a maritime law that says what distance from the shore that nation owns and has access and rights to. So there are some weird legal loopholes too that I think Russia and China push the lines up sometimes.
Yeah, so I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, like for everyone watching, we're looking at this more from a technical point of view and just like an OSINT point of view. So we'll leave the politics out of it. But it's fascinating, Ray. I mean, it's amazing that you can track all these ships all over the ocean just on a website.
Yeah, and there's some other things we can do too. For instance, the Pioneer, they have ownership listed, and I'm finding this through this platform through MarineTraffic, but you could easily Google their management structure because they're still a company. So they have company websites and things, and they will list their fleets. So this one is owned by Longo Shipping and Trader Limited, and their managers First Skylines LLC. So this company is interesting because it is registered in the Seychelles, and that is also an indicator that it could be trying to bury its ownership in places that would, get less oversight and people would dig into less. They have more legal loopholes and things like that. We can take Longo Shipping, and it's actually sanctioned. So there's quite a bit of details on it. If you were to click on the sanctions and read the sanctions, there's some treasury reports. You would think as an analyst, this information's already been reported. What good is it? But a lot of it provides patterns that we can then use to detect other vessels doing the same things, because they're not all doing unique activities and ownership structures. They find something that works and then they run with it. So I would dig through here. I would pull out information about Mingo. It says it's registered owner of the Saihi, which I think was an old name for Pioneer. So if we hop back over here in my dashboard and look at the Pioneer, under vessel characteristics, it tells us some things like former names. So you can see back in July, one of the former names was the Saihi. So this tells us that it has changed its name several times, which is not necessarily illegal. But if they do it a lot, it would raise eyebrows.
I can't see the flags too clearly and I can't recognize all of them, but they've moved from country to country in a short amount of time, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Different flags, right?
July, April, March, yeah. Yep. And then it flags similar vessels that might be doing that behavior. So, if you're not seeing any activity under this, you can go and look up the other name, which maybe we can find something under that. And I don't have too many sites that I stick to regularly. A lot of times I will do just this, just Google within quotes, and then I'll just find something like I have never heard of, Vessel Dove, but that might be a good site to look at for free stuff. But I would go through here and I would, look at some sites and what they say about it and see if it gives me any more details and kind of create a list of patterns and things from what I'm finding in open sources. Equasis is a really good free site. I think you just sign up and say you're an investigator or you're doing open source intelligence, and you'll get an account. And in here, you can do a lot of research that I am doing in marine traffic in my paid account. Let's try looking for Pioneer 1 and see what comes up. Okay, so it gives us the IMO number, it tells us what year it is, and it gives us inspection detail, which is pretty interesting. Sanctions information. Under inspections, we can see that it had inspections from the Russian authority, Indonesia.
It's amazing how stuff is tracked, like ships are tracked. The same with aeroplanes, I assume. It's the same kind of thing, right? They're all tracked, so you can see where they are in the world from a safety point of view. But this gives you a lot of information to investigate. It's amazing.
And I don't think people understand, first, how big the ocean is and how much strange activity goes on there, but how relevant it is to a lot of jobs, especially cyber jobs, because these ships, they're not just boats. They're huge containers for physical cyber technology. You have cranes on board a lot of these larger ships, and those interface with the system. There's ECDIS, which is the positioning of the ship. All of the systems connect into several different systems on there. There's the engine room. There's all sorts of things that are relevant to cybersecurity. And there are cyber laws and cyber rules around what you can and can't do with vessels, but the same with any hacker stuff, cyber stuff, they're going to find a way around it. So it's good to kind of understand what can be done. One thing I did here with the Port Said, I went to Google Earth and I found the Suez Canal container terminal was part of Port Said, where the Pioneer went. And I saw that they were having new cranes installed in 2015, which seems very long ago. But if you think about how big those are and how long they probably last, I would imagine they're still there. So what I would do is I would go and try and find what these cranes are. I think they mention they're superpost Panamax cranes, and see if there's any vulnerabilities associated with it. Could they be hacked in any way? What would happen if they were hacked? Are there cameras on board? Because people sit inside of them, and then they have a camera that watches them and a camera that watches their work. So if someone could come in through the camera and then pivot into the rest of the system because it's not containerized, that could be a big issue for a port.
So from an OSINT point of view, there's obviously a lot of information that you can gather. But what you're saying now as well is, like, from a cybersecurity point of view, the way the world is at the moment with everything happening, you could have governments hacking the ships and the ports to cause all kinds of issues from a supply chain point of view. I remember
Yes.
Is that right? I remember the example in the Suez Canal where that one ship went sideways or something, and that caused like huge delays with deliveries in the UK, as an example. Like the whole UK was struggling because you couldn't get stuff because of that one ship. And that's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, for months. Because you would think once they clear it up, it's fine, but the backlog has a dramatic effect around the world.
Yeah.
If you think about China, if one of China's biggest ports had an issue at their port, we wouldn't get supplies for a year.
Yeah.
And then there was this one story that came out in 2024 about these Chinese-made cranes at U.S. ports that were reported as a security threat.
And that's because of poor security?
It was because they were made in China, and there was concern that China may have left kind of like a back door in the crane to see what they were doing, or that they may have put the ability for them to hack into the cranes. I think the main concern was that they were Chinese-made cranes and the cyber security around it was not very good.
It's funny, in the news at the moment, there's this, I saw Australia have got into this as well. It was in the UK and I think it was Norway with these buses, and they were concerned that these electric buses could be remotely shut down by the Chinese vendor, stuff like that. So, it's the same kind of thing, right? Just in a different space. It's very interesting.
And it's hard when China makes so much of our electronics and our products. These companies are in a position where else do they find this stuff? So they're kind of cornered into buying these products. But I think on our side, cybersecurity professionals who work at these ports and on this technology should be aware of what can be done so that they can start to protect against it. And it's amazing how easy these things can be to hack. So if you go to Shodan, which is an IoT search, and you search for Furuno, which is a brand for AIS on ships, you can find them around the world, see if there's vulnerabilities. I mean, this is what an attacker would do. They would find low-hanging fruit, what is already out there, and that's what they would attack.
So that's an AIS on a ship probably, or like on a port or somewhere, right?
Yes. Yeah, I'd have to dig in to see where it's located, because there are shore-based AIS systems, and then there are ship-based AIS systems. But they also talk to each other. So, and the ships talk to them through other systems. So it is possible that if a shore-based system was hacked, that it could affect the fleet of ships that communicate with it.
I think people are just so used to, right, that the until something goes wrong in the Suez Canal or something goes wrong somewhere in the world, we're just used to stuff arriving. And it's like Amazon deliveries, right? It's going to come next day it's here, or the same day it's here. I mean, it's really important what you highlight here. If someone hacks these ships or whatever, or something happens, it can affect millions of us and affect entire countries.
Yes, yeah, and that's just civilians, right? Like if you think about what can happen, government-wise, there's a lot of weird stuff that happens in the ocean. If you think about China, they have the maritime militia. They are building up islands to claim ownership of certain areas. There's a lot of standoffs down there. They kind of mandate how people travel through the region. There's the subsea cables being cut up around Norway.
Yeah.
And then you have the dark fleets and the oil stuff going on, and then warships being moved around for various global issues. So there is a lot going on. It's a lot to keep track of as a maritime analyst because it is so broad. And I'm not sure a lot of it gets to the public often until something happens.
What sparked this conversation is like obviously the US boarding these Venezuelan ships or whatever flag they're flying. But that makes it front page news. But otherwise, it's in the background and everyone just assumes life goes on, right? And it's not actually happening. A lot of stuff's happening in the background.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff's happening in the background, and it takes a while for people to catch up to the patterns that they're using to be able to detect them. Because just like an adversary, like a hacker, they're going to change their TTPs to get what they want.
So Ray, you obviously passionate about this, but like give us a bit of a story. Why did you get into this? And I'm assuming you spend a lot of your day doing this. I mean, don't go into the specifics, but give us an idea of why is this important. We've spoken a bit about military, we've spoken about the dark fleet and stuff, but like give us a bit of the stuff that you're doing and why it's really important, and why are you excited about this?
I got into maritime by accident, complete accident. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go in cybersecurity. I happened into OSINT. I started trying to become known in the OSINT community, so I would write blogs and give talks and create content.
Yeah.
More as a way to teach myself, because I figured if I wrote about it, then I could learn it.
Yeah,
So
I love that. It's the best way, yeah.
So I would go out to Twitter and LinkedIn, and I would look for other people who were doing something that I thought was cool, and then I'd try to pick a unique angle.
Yeah.
And then write my own blog about it. So I saw a blog about someone hacking into a ship at some point, and I started thinking that's really cool, and you don't hear about that a lot.
Yeah.
And I wonder what you could do from an OSINT perspective prior to hacking it. Like, what details could you find? Because it's not just the ship, it's the crew, it's the people at the port, it's what they're doing, where they're going. There's so much involved, and then all the technology too. So it kind of hit all those notes, between the cyber and the OSINT stuff that I wanted to do. So I wrote a blog on it, and it kind of took off. And then people started asking me about it. So I wrote another one, and then I wrote another, and I just became a maritime person. And I found that I really enjoyed it. And it was a unique angle in this space that was at the time untapped. And I really enjoyed like the hunt of it. Day to day, I think that it's super important, and I'm excited about it because I get to touch so many different things. I like that You can do corporate reconnaissance because you're looking at the organizations. You're doing people OSINT because of the crew and people on board and who they're interacting with. You're doing the maritime research. And then the cyber technology part of it. What can be hacked? What systems are on there? Can you find any technology that's being used across their fleet that could be an indicator that one vessel is part of the fleet? Things like that really excite me.
So, Ray, you work for a company which we won't mention. I'm assuming you are getting paid by companies that want to investigate that the people that they're using are legit, or is it governments that want to make sure that stuff is correct? Why are you getting paid and others getting paid to do this? What's the reasons behind it? Apart from, it's interesting, but I mean, I'm assuming there's huge commercial reasons for doing this.
Yeah, I work primarily with U.S. government clients.
Yeah.
So their government asks. Many of them I can't talk about.
Sure.
But I think there is a need in commercial because of supply chain. Everyone's concerned about their supply chain being disrupted, whether it's because of a war that's going on or pirates or, weather. So supply chain research is important. I think the governments care because they want to find illicit stuff. They want to board these vessels. They want to prevent it and understand what it looks like so they can see it and stop it before it gets bad. So more pattern of life and understanding a region, things like that. And then I think there's some weird offshoots like journalism. They want to know because they want to stay on top of what's going on. You see this with the dark fleets right now. Human trafficking organizations, they, want to prevent human trafficking, so they want to understand how things are being shipped. Drug trafficking, that's more government, but that's a big angle there too. We were blowing up submarines and stuff not that long ago, probably still are. So that is top of mind for government, and then also commercial because they're traveling through those regions, and lots of these ships that are doing this type of activity, dropping drugs off the side of the boat so somebody can pick it up. They are commercial vessels that are also doing the illicit activity. So that becomes a risk for the owners.
Ray, can you talk a bit about the drug side of things? Because that's also very interesting. I know there's this big thing in the US and South America as well with the drugs. But it's been going on for years and years and years. Like you mentioned the submarines and stuff. I mean, the drug cartels, and I mean, I don't know enough to make good comments, but they are smuggling drugs into the US and other places using these like these small submarines. And obviously, they're using normal boats. I mean, even in this part of the world, it's happening all the time. So I'm assuming that's a big reason why governments want to know, about what's going on.
Yes, and I think that's a very hard thing to stop because they are small and they can plan these operations and participate in them without anybody knowing, for the most part. And it's a cat and mouse game.
Yeah.
Right? Like they find a way that works. We find how they're doing it, we stop it, they find another way to do it.
Yep.
So it's just like this constant evolution of behavior that we have to investigate to stay ahead of. It's finding them, of course, but it's also predicting how they're going to do it, what they're going to shift to next.
I mean, you mentioned like the ocean's massive, right? So it feels like if they turn off this AIS thing, they can't be found. I mean, I'm assuming it's satellites or like you said, people just standing around taking photos. Is that how when they go dark, how on earth do you find them, track them?
It's satellite. It's you have to, because they change their identity, you always have to cross-verify with something else. So it's usually imagery or someone on the ground. I think if they turn off their AIS all the time, they could still be caught by things like RF, like radio frequency. Everybody on board has a phone. There's things like ad tech data, which is, the apps on your phone are used to collect data, and, government agencies can use that to find where people are located. And, if they have phones on board, they can kind of pinpoint where the ship is.
So that's through like the cellular network, but also I'm assuming they have satellite on the boats for communication. So that can be that's what you're referring to, right? So they can pinpoint where your phone is through the satellite or through the cell phone networks and stuff.
Yeah, and there's RF collection capabilities too, which that's beyond me. I don't quite understand how it works, but I know there are platforms where you can go and you can see, all the RF pings in a region, and you can try and line it up where a vessel is supposed to be at that time. And it's not 100%. You still have to apply some judgment to it, but it can give you an idea of maybe where the vessel is. A lot of maritime is not 100%. You're never going to be able to say, yes, this thing is doing this bad thing, and it was here for the most part. So it's a lot of likely. It's likely doing this, and then, some action takes place. They board a vessel, and then they prove it.
So Ray, let's say I'm interested in learning more. I don't know much, but I want to learn about OSINT, but specifically, with ships and like the dark fleet. It sounds really interesting, especially with what's happening these days. Where can I go? Do you have a blog? Can people connect with you on LinkedIn? Can you give us some advice, if I'm interested in, getting to know people and also learning about this field?
Yes. So I have a website, raybaker.net.
Yep.
And if you go there, I have some information about the books and some speaking stuff, but I also have a blog. So you can go there and see what I have been writing about recently. I just wrote one on the Danish toll, which kind of shapes how the dark fleet is being captured, the laws they're using to do that. So I found that pretty interesting. You can also find me on LinkedIn. You can reach out. I'm happy to add you or talk to you. And you can sign up for my newsletter. Every time I write a blog or something, I push out a newsletter.
Right, you got to show us that thing about, is it Denmark? What are they? Give us a quick overview of that, because that's like really interesting. What are they doing? Are they stopping ships and then that's how they capture them? What's give us the 30-second overview.
This is Danish history.
Okay.
So if you're into history, this is more of like historical lesson. So they have the Øresund Strait, which is a very narrow strait that goes through Denmark. And back in the day, they basically ruled that entire area. You had to go through there to get to other parts of the world. So they started taking a toll, and people had to pay to go through that area. And it basically funded the building of their castle, this castle here, the Kronborg Castle. But because people started getting really angry about how they had to keep paying the toll, and they kept changing the toll based on, the cargo and the weight, and people were getting very frustrated. So they kind of fought back, and modern rules were made about the maritime zones. And that's what dictates an EEZ, which is an exclusive economic zone. That's how far away from the edge of a nation they can claim as theirs. And then beyond that, how much they can harvest resources, things like that. So it basically dictates kind of how we do things today.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you mentioned China. I mean, we won't go into the politics again, but there's like big issues, like you said, where they're building islands to claim stuff. And I know between the Philippines and China, there's a lot of activity where, like, how far does that ownership extend, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a big issue in China right now, because they're literally dumping sand into the sea to build islands so that they can claim parts of the sea. I could do a whole episode on the Maritime Militia, which is where they use standard fishing vessels as their militia, and they call them to action. There's a very cool video that just came out for Starboard, I think, or the New York Times, where it shows hundreds of vessels over time, and they all line up in a line as like a show of force. That would be very cool to talk about.
So for everyone who's watching, I mean, Ray, can you just give us like the quick overview of it? But for everyone who's watching, let us know if you want a full episode on that. So what does the militia do? Is it like intimidating other vessels and stuff like that? Or what are they about?
Yeah, so they are standard fishing vessels. They work as a fishing vessel, 80, 90% of the time, but they are kind of fitted with rams and things like that, so that when the Coast Guard, the Chinese Coast Guard, or the military decides that they want to put them into action, I assume that they call them up. In my mind, they're calling them on the phone.
Yeah.
And they all just like go into action, and it's usually a show of force. So if, a UK warship or a US warship goes through, or a Philippines ship gets too close to one of the islands or something that they claim, they will call all these fishing vessels in, and they will make a line, or they will ram one of them, or the Coast Guards will shoot water out of a hose at the ship. It's like the Wild West down there.
So everyone who's watching, let us know if you're interested in learning more about that. Ray, as always, thanks so much for sharing. There's so much to learn. It's amazing. Every time I talk to an expert like yourself, you just realize there's a whole world that we don't know about. Thanks for shedding some light on this and, for teaching us and, making free resources, writing your book, but also your blog and, sharing so much online. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Anytime I get to talk about maritime, I'm happy.